Welcome to the Monday, April 23rd, 2012 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Item 1, roll call. Commissioner Wiseman.
Present.
Commissioner Sahakian.
Present.
Commissioner Yakubian. Here. Commissioner Mangasarian. Here. Chairperson Fuad.
Here. What is next, please?
Item 1B is flag salute. Chairperson Fuad.
May we stand for the salute of flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What is next, please?
Item 2, posting of agenda. The agenda for the Monday, April 23rd, 2012 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, April 20th, 2012 before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Thank you. What is next?
Item 3 is approval of minutes. Item 3A, February 29th, 2012 special meeting.
Do we have any comments on the minutes?
Comments from this side.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I do. I think
Please.
a part of Mr. Sahakian's comment was not written the way he wanted it written.
It's under what item?
Page 3 of 3. It reads, there should be no more than 10,000 average daily traffic on streets. I don't think that's what Mr. Sahakian meant to say. I don't know exactly what it said, but if you read that, it doesn't make sense, that sentence.
I believe I said that we need to closely look at road diets if the ADT is over 10,000, and I believe I mentioned the ITE study, which was not an ITE study, it was an MDOT study, and which I emailed to everybody.
Okay.
Just note it.
Is that okay?
We'll make that correction.
Do I hear a motion for approval?
Move approval of the minutes
Second?
Second.
as modified.
Roll call, or can we just approve it? The minutes are approved. What's next, please?
Item 4 is oral communication. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The Commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision.
I don't have any cards this evening, so what's next? Do we? Yeah, well, go ahead, please.
Okay. Item 5, action item. Item 5A is a report regarding amendments to the Glendale Municipal Code 1995, Chapter 5.84, taxi cabs and other vehicles for hire. At 5A1 is motion to recommend the adoption of the draft taxi cabs and other vehicles for hire ordinance.
Mr. Magdani would like to proceed with what we're doing?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Parking Commission, I wanted to give you a very quick overview of what staff is recommending to the Commission. Just wanted to tell you that the ordinance that you have in the staff report, we've been collectively working with a number of staff members from City Attorney's Office, Ms. Sansoni, who has really taken the time to go through the entire ordinance and make corrections and make the changes and amendments, edits. We also have 2 members of the City Clerk's Office that have been working on the applications, processing the applications over the last 15 to 20 years. Ms. Maria Maldonado and Steve Rodriguez, and from Public Works Admin, Alina Morshedian, and Traffic and Transportation, Rebecca Grana Johnson. So the staff from different departments, we work together, we look at all the issues we've had with nominal emergencies, try to put together all the areas that we think needs to be cleaned up. This code is a number of years old, and so we learn from experience what things work, what things don't work, and what clarification or changes needs to be made in the code. What we've experienced in the last several years is we get a flood of these applicants that are coming in for non-emergency. They operate non-ambulatory service throughout Glendale. The operators, existing or new, they're able to find their niche market, whether it's because of their tailored service to a doctor or a medical office, or because of the type of drivers that they have, they speak a different language, they're able to get enough business to operate. Usually most of the non-emergency operators, they start with one, maybe two vehicles, or if they're already established in other cities, they have multiple vehicles, they want to be able to license in Glendale as well. So if they're operating in Burbank, they want to be able to license in Glendale, they license in Pasadena, for example, so that if they drop a patient off to in city of Glendale, they're also able to pick them up. And we've had one of the most strictest requirements for non-emergency vehicle applications. You know, we do check everything, which is also outlined in the code. Going through the process, it's become a very, very difficult thing for staff, for ourselves, for the city clerk office, setting up hearings, making sure every application is submitted on time in the window. They submit the application in the window, but then it takes a lot of time and effort to make sure that the application is complete. And we've been very, very lenient in the past to make sure if somebody submitted their application in the month of July, basically July 1 to end of July, we work with the applicants to make sure that their insurance in place, the information about their business, their vehicle, storage of vehicle, all of that is taken care of. But we found that it becomes a lot of work, and we just don't have the staff time at that level. Plus, we have to take the commission time because we can't get all the applications together at once to schedule them together as we used to be able to do in one, maybe two commission meetings. So they get spread out over time. So we try to clean up the code to the extent possible to make sure that the applications are submitted. We will not accept the application unless it's complete. Before, they would just submit the application, they meet the deadline. The last day of the month, they submit the application, meet the deadline. Now we have to go back and one by one ask for information. So a number of changes that Ms. Sansoni, I'd like her to kind of walk you through on the key areas of the changes, how these changes will impact the applicants, and how it will impact the city one way or the other. What editorial changes we've made some sections because we have the taxi ordinance and a non-emergency. They were mixed together originally. We've tried to separate them to the extent possible to make the ordinance read better and makes it easier for everyone to use. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Sansoni to give you the overview of the changes that we have made, and we'll be happy to answer any questions after that.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, I'm very, very happy to present to you this ordinance. We've identified certain concerns that we've had in the ordinance, and there was time to do some cleanup in the formatting. So I want to walk you through some of the salient issues that we've mentioned in our staff report, and then happy to answer any questions you may have. The main thing is to remember that this is not the entire chapter for taxi cabs. We have provided you with a copy of the entire chapter 5.84. So you'll see that some sections, in fact, most of the sections haven't been changed at all. What you will see in the draft ordinance are the underlining, which is for the new language, and then strike out for language that's being removed. There's one cleanup that we did that may look a little unusual, like we're taking out the entire section, but all we're doing is relocating that. And I wanted to bring that to your attention. That's the new section 584.080. All we did was lift that language from 584.100, and we made that part its own section. If I can give you the page 4 of the ordinance. No substantive changes were made, but because it's relocated and given a new section number, it's all underlined, but there were no substantive changes there. But that was in order to make it more clear, easier to read, and it wasn't buried in the application process, which is really not where we thought it should go. Otherwise, the major changes are in non-emergency medical vehicle applications. The concerns were, as Jono mentioned, the length of time to schedule applications, to deem them complete, then to have the commission hear every single one of them. Some of them only have one vehicle, some are operating out of their homes, And this is a way to streamline the process for the benefit of the public as well as for the benefit of the applicants, because that way they can provide their services in a speedy manner. And when there's such small operations, we can do this administratively and not take the public's time and your time with public hearings. The hearings, oftentimes there are no speakers at the podium, and they have become quite routine in their applications. We have also been working on a new application form which will memorialize all the requirements that we're now going to have in the ordinance, so that it's more of a checklist than ever before. Either they do or they do not have this information. That way the applicants can be assured that there will be a decision made in a quick turnaround manner once that window period ends. That's the application window period between July 1 and July 31st. We have addressed the concerns by removing the public hearing process from the applications. We have also paid closer attention these days to the storage of these vehicles. As we mentioned, as Jono mentioned, these are smaller operations, sometimes one or two vehicles. And if they are to be storing the vehicles at the residence of the owner, they are only allowed to store one vehicle, and that vehicle must be stored off-street, preferably in a garage. But in any case, they will need to have a home occupation permit that is a standard for home occupations in Glendale, if they are going to park their vehicles in Glendale, and that's in Chapter 30.45. I've not provided you with a copy of that, but that's in our zoning code, and there's a list of findings that have to be made to ensure that they don't become a nuisance to the neighborhood. Also, in the decision-making process whether to grant or deny with or without conditions, the city clerk will now handle those applications and those decisions administratively, so that they will not need to make certain findings of public convenience and necessity. That does not mean that we're not looking at safety and making sure that the public is protected, but it then becomes a one-on-one decision that the city clerk will take individually to ensure that their applications are correct, that the information that's on there is truthful. And in fact, we have a new cause for a denial, revocation, or suspension of a permit, and that is if we do find that there's false information on the application. So we're that's found in 584-110, subsection D. That's actually what we added to the ordinance to ensure that there is accurate information on those applications. Just to give you that page, is page 12. In addition, we require now that all applicants, not just for non-emergency medical, but all vehicles for hire and taxis, notify the city when there are changes in their status. This is something we felt was very important to put in the code, and that will be found on page 10 in section 584-100, subsection H. You'll see a list, or subsection I, excuse me. You'll see a list of items that written notice must be provided to the city within 30 days of any change. That's corporate status, business address, vehicle descriptions, color scheme, and so on. Your direction, I'm going to, address insurance, especially in corporate officers. These are the basics by which we've granted these permits initially. So if any of those basics change, we now place the responsibility on the owner to notify the city within 30 days. Finally, we've had some other protections. Vehicle safety. Now non-emergency medical vehicles will be inspected by a certified mechanic, so that gives the city clerk's office an opportunity to ensure the safety of the vehicles in a speedy manner. That is all on the cost of the applicant. But there have been other items of this ordinance of the code that have not been changed. Insurance is still the same. The city's protections as far as passenger safety are still the same. So that really concludes my report, and if there's any questions you have, I'd be happy to answer them. And thank you very much.
Any questions from commissioners? Comments? Please.
And I have a question. In case of an appeal, that is when the case will come here, right?
That's correct. In fact, John just reminded me that I did want to mention that the appeal process is a little different now. If the city clerk denies, revokes, or suspends a permit, an owner's permit, the owner may appeal to the commission within the same time period as most appeals are in the code, which is 15 days from the date of the decision. Then once the commission makes its decision, that is the end of the matter. There's no further appeals. And that's just for non-emergency medical now, that you do sit as the appellate body for those decisions.
Help me out. What would be the course of action of this committee? If the process, the permit has gone through the process and has been denied, what can we do here? We can ask the staff to look into that again, further investigation.
It's possible, yes, Commissioner Magnuson, that is one of the options that the commission may decide. In the code, it's Chapter 2.88. There's an appeals process, and the commission would sit as a de novo judicial or adjudicative body. De novo means you would take the information that's been presented to you as if it were a brand new case and review it and make the decisions based on the record. So that gives you the same type of judicial authority that the council would have on appeals that it receives. So thereby, you would take a brand new, fresh look at this applicant.
Thank you.
Mr. Coble?
Yeah, I have, well, first off, I'm just really pleased to see that this has come forth and is getting revamped. I know this was a concern for many years, this idea of streamlining this whole process, so I'm very pleased to see that you've put in all this hard work. An issue that I would like to bring up, and I have mentioned this when this had come up at previous meetings, and that is the issue of the texting and driving. And I think now that we've opened this up and we've starting to take a look at this ordinance, this would be a fine time to put something explicit into this, where, and I guess it would be under the section of requirements to get a permit. And I remember I'd mentioned this to John. We were going to look into it. I actually called the Office of Traffic and Safety to see if there were formal classes that drivers could take, and unfortunately, according to them, there are no, that they know of any formal classes. So with that being said, what about the possibility of requiring Bluetooth in the car? I mean, these are the most vulnerable of passengers. First off, I don't know, how are they communicating? Maybe you guys could tell me this. Is this non-emergency transport? Is there a dispatch that they have, but are they on like a CB-type radio dispatch that they have in the vehicle, or is it just by cell phone? How do they communicate if there needs to be communication with the office?
The majority are doing it based on using their cell phone. So the reservations are taken, somebody is calling their number. Unless they have a dispatch center, the larger operators do have a dispatch, but the individual operators, they get a call for reservations, and then they respond to that.
Yeah.
And so hopefully they're not responding as they're driving,
right,
as you said.
And my biggest fear is this is an opportunity, I feel, that we should be able, we are such in the forefront in terms of punitive. I know the police department, they're cracking down, and we're known in the state for being on top of the, texting and driving campaign. But as we're incorporating this into permits, I don't see why, and it would be my suggestion that we do a requirement. Let at least these cars be Bluetooth capable, so that at least from the city's point, we're encouraging, and sending a strong message to them that there will be no texting and driving while operating the vehicle.
We can certainly look into that. Again, at the end of the day, if they're in the business of providing transportation, by law, you're not allowed to text or talk unless you are. But
okay.
But everybody else who violates the law, they do it knowingly that they're in violation.
Is that explicit? And I'm sorry to interrupt, General, but is that explicitly stated in under the violations that would then result in a revocation or suspension of permits?
I need to ask Chris to see if
I would like to see that. I would like to see if we could do something with that.
if, let's say, somebody violates that requirement, if they get a ticket for texting, if by law we can revoke their permit, something Chris may have to look into it. I mean, would legally, like anybody else who is driving and they text or they use their phone,
Right.
they get a citation, and that's what the law requires, that you give citation. Now,
Like
since they have a permit,
any infraction, speeding.
yeah, any infraction, you get speeding, you get cited, you pay a ticket, or you have to go to traffic school. I don't think anybody revokes their permit if somebody is a cab operator or is a bus operator or whatnot. They get a citation for it. I don't know how far we can go. It's a good point. I just need to see how.
I think, if I may, that should be company policy on top of what you're saying. Just like the light rail system, it's zero tolerance. You cannot, the operator cannot use a cell phone. That's the bottom line. But it could be challenged in court if, on our end, we come up with a policy that you get a ticket for texting, then the city of Glendale is going to revoke your permit. And correct me if I'm wrong on that. It could be challenged, probably.
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, Commissioner Sakian, actually there is a provision in the code now, if they receive 3 moving citations within a certain period of time, I think it's within the last 3 years, that certainly can be looked at as far as what types of violations they are. This is definitely something that refers to public safety, and my only concern is that we are not preempted by state law, essentially the vehicle code, from regulating stricter requirements than are found in the vehicle code. My sense of it is that we're not preempted because all we're doing is requiring specific equipment, or in the alternative, if they get more than a certain number of moving violations within a narrower period of time, that they're subject to suspension, revocation, or denial. So I think it's possible.
Is that 3 per driver or 3 per company?
That's for the driver's permit to be suspended, so it's per driver.
Mr. Chairman, if we can also have Steve Rodriguez provide info on this item.
Thank you. Steve Rodriguez, licensed investigator with the City Clerk's Office. Just for your FYI, for your information, when drivers have to apply every year they submit a DMV H6 report to us. The law in the Glendale Municipal Code regarding the taxi cabs or any vehicles for hire, the drivers, what constitutes violation is if they get 3 violations within the last year, within the last 3 years, 2 of them with the last year that they apply, they cannot drive suspended for 1 year. Driving violations are considered 1 point. So I can't, there's no police officers here, but using the Bluetooth, I would assume that the violation for that would at least be 1 point, 2 points. But we renew the drivers every year, and one of the very strict policies that we have or conditions is their driving record. Just rest assured that that's in place, and that if they continue moving violations, their permit will be suspended without a hearing denied.
But that applies to any driver, regardless. Any driver, even if you're not working for a company, non-ambulatory company, you get 3 points. You get suspended. Am I correct?
three moving violations
That's three moving
or 3
within-
points within the last 3 years. 2 of them
Last year.
occurring within the last year of when they apply.
Correct. Now, I think my fellow commissioner is talking above and beyond that, because you're in the business of serving the public now.
Correct.
And you have passengers in the back.
Correct.
Then there should be something that prohibits you from texting, period. And if you do, then we should have something in place to revoke their permit or penalize them. Am I correct?
Exactly.
That's the way I'm understanding
I
it.
think we should be.
And if we get that report from the Department of Motor Vehicle when they renew, or a new driver, then we will advise them, you can't drive. They're even to a point where if they're borderline, and we had made the administrative decision, when they're borderline, they'll bring in a DMV permit every 3 months, every 6 months, where we feel that we want to make sure that these drivers are aware that if they get one more point, their permit will be denied. That's their livelihood. Their permit will be denied for 1 year. So in certain cases, borderline, sure, we're going to ask for a DMV report every 3 months.
And now the driver is being penalized, and correct me if I'm wrong, the company and the permit is not in jeopardy. They can bring in another driver and then, correct.
A license.
That's correct.
The issue is, depending on the violation, you can have somebody drive 70 miles an hour, could create a worse safety issue than somebody's texting. Not that both of them are not legal, they're in violation. So one option I'm just thinking out loud, put in the code that the company should have a policy against texting, and like we have on our Beeline drivers, they're not allowed. The company policy says if they're in violation and they caused an accident, which has happened, they're dismissed from the company. I mean, they have a very strict policy on that. So it might be that we require to have a policy that if they're in violation of texting or talking on the phone during driving, that they will be, disciplined, and including dismissal, something like that. I don't know if it's something you can impose on a private sector company, but we know the transportation companies that work with us, they have that policy on their own. It's not a requirement, but they have that policy already because of liability that they have with their insurance companies. They require that.
Okay, we go through this rigorous testing of their vehicles. Is everything sound on their vehicles? Is it passing all the tests? But that's the physical. And I'm just thinking that is there any way that we can also, in that requirement of checklist, require Bluetooth capable something in that vehicle so that if they do get a call, it's being done safely and to the protection of the vulnerable. I think the most kind of vulnerable passenger in the back.
I would think, Bluetooth, isn't something you just slot into a car. I think it's quite an involved deal. I think
Not
that may be
necessarily. No,
quite onerous.
They do have. You can buy them at Costco, and they're $59.
Just one note on that, though. There's a movement at the National Transportation Safety Board
To eliminate.
level to eliminate Bluetooth.
Bluetooth.
Yes. So everything hands-free will be gone probably.
It is depending on what type of phone they have, if they have a reception, if the Bluetooth is working. There's a number of things that happens. As some of the newer vehicles, obviously, you just automatically sync your phone with your car, and there's not an issue with that. But the other ones, it's something we can certainly look into, see if we can require that they have a policy that they don't text, not necessarily you have to have a Bluetooth, or they have something that will prevent a driver from getting distracted during driving when they're making a reservation or getting a reservation call. I think that's
Okay.
really the intent.
Okay.
Commissioner Weissman.
Well, let me start by saying, first of all, I do support the streamlining of the process for permitting and licensing of the non-emergency medical transportation vehicles. And my thought process on that is mainly nobody is going to jump through all the hoops of getting a vehicle licensed and a driver and everything else they need to do just so they can cruise around Glendale looking for sick people to take for the doctor. Obviously, it's going to be companies that already have an existing base of customers. And medical professionals that they're working with. And I have full confidence in our city staff and city clerk's office that they will be able to handle this properly on an administrative basis. Again, with the proviso that appeals, should there be any, will come to us. I believe my colleagues' comments on distracted driving are very well taken, and I'm pretty much in agreement. I think texting by far is probably the worst of the distracted driving distractions. Although I do think about my days as a taxi driver in the city of Los Angeles back in the mid-1970s, where, you did have radios to report to dispatch, and it was a mic that you held up and you had to key, and that was a distraction as well if you're trying to drive. So Bluetooth, while it goes some distance at least towards producing a hands-free environment if they need to use their cell phone, even if they're just talking hands-free, it's still a distraction. And I would also be willing to support anything that we can do that will stand up to any possible legal challenges in terms of ensuring that all of the various forms of distracted driving are minimized. And I think Commissioner Sahakian's comment about making it company policy is a good idea. I guess in terms of our transit with MV Transportation, that is a contractual arrangement, and so that's something that can actually be specified in a contract, and we don't have contract-type arrangements necessarily with these carriers, so that's perhaps not an avenue that we can pursue, but I think anything that we can do in that direction would be a good thing. I do not want to pick up my morning paper and read about a non-emergency medical transportation vehicle crashing because the driver was texting and he had a bunch of people in the back. Anything we can do to avoid that kind of situation that's feasible, I would certainly support.
I think we can certainly look into it to see so that we're not preempting the vehicle code, whether it's a policy or whatnot. We will look into it and even use what we have from contracted companies, the language from those, to see if we can suggest this is the type of policy. They have to have a policy, and here's a suggested language for that policy so that they can incorporate it as part of their own operational policies. So something like that, we'll certainly look into it.
And I had one more question. You had mentioned, I think, and please correct me if I got this wrong, that the language regarding the taxi cab vehicle licenses that's in here is the same language that existed previously. It's just been moved to a new location? Or have there been any modifications to the...
Just moved.
This is the language about the number of taxi cab vehicles and how they can apply for them. That language is identical. It hasn't changed.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sakin, did you have anything? Just finally, I also think it's a very good idea. You mentioned you impose conditions. Is it? And I think you've probably been doing this already. Are the applications sort of a black and white process? There's no staff discretion, or can they impose conditions? And if an applicant is unhappy with the conditions that have been imposed, can they appeal it?
Good questions, all of them. The application can be granted with conditions and limitations, such as instead of a 5-year permit, it can be a 3-year permit. It would have to be fact-specific based on the information that's in the application. So in that respect, it is a discretionary permit. It's not ministerial. That is, if all the boxes are checked, that the city clerk has no discretion. But we're trying to limit it to those items that could affect the public, could be concerns, for example, if they're limited to a certain number of years on their insurance. I mean, that's strictly hypothetical here. But if that were the case, and of course we wouldn't grant a permit longer than what the insurance would be for. Usually they're yearly policies, but I'm just talking hypothetically if there was some limitation where they couldn't operate, or there was some question about maybe a driver record or some past history. Maybe that would be a conditional permit where the city clerk could reduce the time or reduce the type of operation to perhaps one or two locations. There's some flexibility. In other words, I'm kind of speculating as to what types of items we might see the city
You've
clerk.
been doing this presently.
We haven't been doing it presently. We've been giving every applicant a 5-year permit if they're granted, taxis and all the other types of vehicles. Now, we're looking at situations that we had, I believe, just last year where the Commission was faced with an application and there were some members that weren't comfortable with the full 5 years. Could they limit the number of years? And we looked back at the code and we saw that the city clerk issues the certificate after the vehicles have been approved. And that's when the period of time starts for the term of the permit. We found that that might be an opportunity for us to change that, to give the granting body, either the Commission on Taxi Cabs or the city clerk for non-emergency medical, the opportunity to limit or condition certain approvals when it's deemed appropriate.
And can an applicant appeal a condition to us if they're unhappy?
The other question you had, yes, Commissioner Vaught, you certainly could see an applicant appeal that decision, that part of the decision, to the full commission.
Is that clear in the new statute? Not just revoked, denied, or suspended, it's conditioned or...
The approval process could be conditioned. Appeals, that is, from the applicant, if they're not satisfied with the decision.
Is that appeal in your new wording that they can appeal a conditional? Yeah.
It doesn't say that specifically because it says if they are, let me just check that. The
Suspended,
language,
revoked wouldn't cover the point.
suspended, revoked, or denied.
Yeah, see, they could be approved, but with a condition, and that wording wouldn't allow them to appeal it, unless I'm mistaken.
In my view, they could appeal it.
Is that tantamount to denial?
It's a partial denial.
Okay, well, you're the lawyer.
It's a partial denial, but it's possible we could change that to make it more explicit, and I appreciate the comment on that.
And staff is comfortable with this. You're going to be imposing you're going to be giving yourselves new discretion, and I'm assuming staff is comfortable undertaking that.
Yes.
And just one final point of a minor wording thing. On page 6, you mentioned that not more than one car can be stored at a residence. It's looking at page 6, it's item 5. Not more than one vehicle may be stored at a residential address.
Yes.
When I first read that, I thought that meant if a company has multiple vehicles, only one of them can be as a residential address. I think what you mean is no more one at each residential.
That's correct. Let's say what happens is most of these operators have drivers who drive the vehicle home. So they might be under the same company. Somebody may have, operating from home, they may have two vehicles. We don't, in the past, we've had both two or three of them. We see them parked on the street.
No, I understand that. I'm wording as a wording, as a draft.
As a wording correction, cleanup.
It should be stored at each or any.
Okay.
Because it almost implies if your company has 5, only one of them can be at a home and the other 4 have to be somewhere else. Maybe it's just me, but...
That's a good point.
Chairman Flood, may I jump in on that? Actually, he jumped on that right to the section that I wanted to make my last point on. I have a question about the recourse of neighbors. As we received, I know, an email from a very upset resident. I think it was because of a taxi cab that was being parked out on the street. But in the case of the non-emergency vehicles, where residents are seeing, let's say, a violation of sort, they come, they file a complaint, is how I see the process to be with the city clerk. But this is kind of a time is of the essence situation. They're claiming that there's a car being parked out there for, so much time. How do you investigate and how do you verify that this is a legitimate complaint, and then you obviously keep this on file for them to be reviewed, or is it immediate revocation according to the language of this, that it would be an immediate suspension if they're violating that?
Let me ask Steve. I know
in the past, there has been situations where somebody was parking their vehicle. As long as they're not violating the parking restrictions, okay, in case we want them to park in their driveway or in their garage. So if they're doing one vehicle, it's one company, one vehicle, and they're parking, you may get a complaint, but they're in compliance. However, if there's more than one, if they're doing other violation, I think Steve, if he gets the call.
I can only recall a few years ago that there was a company that was abusing that same thing, was parking vehicles in an alley and on the street, and we had neighbors complain. We felt that getting these complaints, having the information to us with their license plate, the dates and times that they're parking, we'll go out and investigate. We'll go in the mornings, evenings, whatever hours it needs for us to make a full investigation. And then what we found, taking pictures, so forth and so forth, we worked with the owner. We advised them. You've got neighbors complaining about the vehicles parked on here. And what we did is we actually resolved it by working with the owner and just showing them the evidence that you can't park here. And he eventually got a business location. And that company is no longer with us. But we take those citizen complaints seriously. I don't recall the one that you were referring to, but that's what we do. If we get complaints like that, we'll investigate it. We'll take pictures, whatever it needs to be investigated, and then we'll act accordingly. Because we understand that in Glendale, the traffic in Glendale is there's a lot of cars, and a lot of complaints are there's no parking on the street, and that's what we want to stress with these companies. When they come, the new companies, when they come and apply, we tell them. The commission, the traffic and parking, the department are concerned about the parking. There's very, very limited parking on the street. If you're asking for more vehicles, you're asking for one, they're going to advise you, you're going to park it on private property to make sure that you don't take extra spots on the street. If there's more than one, you're going to need a business location to house those vehicles. So but we'll take it seriously.
On the side note, it was by a resident by the name of Jim Sweeney, and he was out on Alameda area, and it was Beverly Hills Cab Company that I think the commissioners received it. I don't know if you were CC'd on it. But there are, I'm surprised it's only one complaint or one incident, because
But you got to remember, too, there's also people that complain about taxi cabs. We can advise the owners that if these are licensed taxi cabs, but you have to realize that a lot of taxi drivers that drive in different cities bring their vehicles home. And we're not empowered to enforce restrictions on the street as for how long they can park. But if they are licensed taxi cabs, we'll work with the owners and tell them that this is the complaints that we've had.
I think maybe the issue, though, is even if it's not under the purview of the city of Glendale, as in Mr. Sweeney's case with Beverly Hills Cab, this is a commercial vehicle.
Exactly.
And I think the issue then would be, would Glendale PD be responsible for enforcing prohibitions if any such exist?
Cite them with a fine.
Yeah, for commercial vehicles that aren't under the city of Glendale's purview, that are parked in residential areas.
Taxi cabs, if they're legally parked in a residential street, they're legal, as long as they don't violate the 72-hour restriction. So you can't, by our own ordinance, if they're blocking their red curb or anything like that, that's a totally different situation.
Okay, can this, and maybe this isn't the ordinance, but can the city make it a parking violation for a commercial vehicle to park on a street, such as taxis or non-emergency vehicles?
Well, there is a municipal code now, but it's a 72-hour.
But I'm saying just for commercial vehicles, they can't park in residential neighborhoods.
I agree. I think I think personally that this is something I have heard, and I believe it's pervasive in England, especially South Glendale. I'm talking the streets of Maple, Acacia. I have, firsthand discussions with residents who, this is their first complaint, is the parking is very tight down there, and it's taken up by commercial vehicles. I'd like to...
It's a very difficult thing. It's something we should explore. I would recommend that we look into it and come back,
I think
because
we would like you to look at just that sort of.
anywhere in Los Angeles, anywhere, 99% of the cab drivers own their cabs, most of them. Either they own it, they rent it or lease it, but they drive it all day. And that's their vehicle for transportation. So if you restrict them, then it puts a, not say hardship on them, but then they have to find a place to park, to store their vehicles, and then how are they going to get home? So it's a major issue
Well,
in
they
the
would
cab
park in the
business.
driveway, or if they have an apartment, park at the apartment's parking structure.
And
or
South
lot.
Glendale, certainly there is a parking issue, no question about that. But it's something that, you have people who are, have vans that they use it for their landscaping, people who are using it for pool service, contractors. You have all kinds of commercial vehicles
Well,
that
maybe
are
it's
parking.
maybe it's an overnight thing, maybe it's a multi-hour thing.
Yeah,
Not
we can-
that you can't.
It's something we
pause.
need to look at when we say commercial vehicles, including taxis.
Right.
It goes far beyond, and it makes it it
Well,
creates a
then
major.
maybe we're only dealing with this issue. Maybe for that, maybe we just look and see what the parameters of that issue are.
We'll give it some thought. We'll do some research, but it opens up a lot of issues when you start restricting individuals who they drive a vehicle and they take it home, and then the next morning super shuttle drivers or airport shuttles. I see them all over. I see them in my neighborhood. So because the hours they operate, they take them home, or they go pick up the vehicle from their dispatch center, and then they drive it. So it creates all kinds of logistics. So it's something I think it's worth exploring and looking into it, especially in areas that we're talking about. I certainly appreciate that there's a concern.
Maybe
there.
even when we're doing our special parking zones, maybe that's one of the
That could
considerations.
be another area to be looked at.
And I also don't think that it's just a parking issue. It's an eyesore issue. People, they don't like to have commercial vehicles on residential streets, and that's why you see a lot of contractors now using the magnet signs. They just peel them off when they park. And some of these taxi cab drivers, their vehicle is their primary vehicle. So it's not that they have a private car. No, they drive also the taxi cab for their own use. It is challenging, but I have a couple on my street.
Yeah, you have plumbers or have large vehicles and they park on the street. They're more of an eyesore, I would say, many times. Or you have pool operators. They've got all kinds of equipment in the back of their truck, and they can't fit them in their garages. Whether it's an apartment, they can't even get in there, or in their driveways are very, very tight. So we've honestly looked at this before when we were doing some zoning changes in terms of requiring people to park their vehicles in their garages rather than store stuff in their garages. And if you open up some of these garages, pull their passenger vehicles in there, it opens up the on-street parking. The South Brand study survey demonstrated a lot of those issues that you're mentioning. But it's something we can certainly look with our zoning, our planning department to see, are there areas that we can at least, improve the situation? Not totally eliminate it, but at least improve it.
Go ahead. Mr. Chair, can you clarify one thing for me, Jono? Right now, the code says you cannot park a commercial vehicle in a residential neighborhood for more than 72 hours?
I don't have the exact language. I believe
I thought it was any vehicle.
it's any vehicle. Any vehicle.
It's any vehicle, but
even if
there is something regarding commercial vehicles.
We have something which has to do with the size of the vehicles. The large vehicles, years ago we came to the commission, went to city council, we passed an ordinance that large vehicles, because we still get trucks, they find a quiet corner where they drop their trailer or they park their truck overnight. And those types of vehicles, oversized vehicles, are restricted. They're not allowed. In fact, I believe we have signs
Yes.
at the entrance to the city that, because we couldn't restrict it on every street, at the entrance to the city, that's an ordinance, so you can't have a large vehicle park on the street.
And I believe the way it's stated is any vehicle that exceeds either 24 feet in length, 8 feet in width, or 8 feet in height.
And we have some limousines also created all kinds of problems we had in some neighborhoods. They moved out, but over time there was a problem.
Any more comments on this?
Mr. Chairman, just address Commissioner Yakubian's. I looked at this draft check. It still is in their development. And since we require a bunch of things from the drivers, what we could do under the checklist, find out that they provide, well, how they're going to dispatch, and if they have, a policy for that. So we can put that in and then give them a sample policy, at least just to get started. It's something that I checked with Steve, and Steve thought it was a good idea. So we can, add that at least.
And just to be clear, it's not whether they have a policy, it's that they shall have a policy.
They shall have a policy, so we require it in here and give them an example of what that policy should be, so that they can incorporate and submit it back to us. They can sign it with their company name
Fine.
and include that in there. So at least, it doesn't mean they will do it,
Right.
but at least you have something that in case, God forbid, there's an accident or something, at least we can pull that information and say, you had a policy, you did not follow the policy.
Very good. Thank you, Jonah.
Any other comments? Just do you have enough to work with?
Yes, thank you very much. Those are very helpful. For us, our goal would be to go to the City Council in May. We're going to try to get it on the second meeting of May. I believe it's 15, to schedule it for it, because with any ordinance, you introduce it, and then it gets approved the following council meeting, and it takes 30 days to go into effect. This way, we can get very close to the July 1 timeframe where all the existing operators who have submitted new applications, we can process those, the older ones first, and then as we get new applications, they will be subject to all this new requirements. So that's our target date.
I guess, do I hear a motion?
Okay, I would like to move that the Transportation and Parking Commission hereby recommends the adoption of the draft taxicab and other vehicles for hire ordinance with modification that we would add recommendation regarding requirement for a policy that will discuss how they dispatch and use of cell phones.
Second?
I second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Weisman,
Yes.
Commissioner Stahakin,
Yes.
Commissioner Yakubian,
Yes.
Commissioner Mangasarian,
Yes.
Chairperson Fuad.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 6, Commission staff comments updates.
Do we have any staff comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may, very quickly. Our May meeting falls on the Memorial Weekend, which is a holiday. And I'm working with Planning Department. We still have the South Brand ordinance that the Commission had looked at in terms of forming district parking. We're working on that ordinance. I'm working with them in order to see if I can have a special meeting in May in lieu of your regular meeting. And if the timing of the rooms becomes available, we will try to do a special meeting in May. We will send you the dates. I think, Anush, did we come up with 2 dates, I believe, right?
21st and 30th.
21st and 30th of May. We'll send a confirming email to all of you to make sure that you're available. That would be our goal, to bring the South Brand ordinance as it's completed to the Commission for your review. And
This be a joint commission or just us?
no, this will be just the Transportation Parking Commission, because specifically deals with preferential parking.
No, I agree.
If you recall that. That's our goal. If the timing works, the rooms are available, and we do have a majority of the commissioners available. Another update I have for you is the May is going to be the National Bike Month, Bike to Work Month, and there will be a declaration that adopting month of May for bicycling, and we'll be presenting that to the City Council on 1st of May. And our environmental for the bicycle transportation plan was recommended for approval by the Planning Commission. We're trying to go to the May 15th or May 30th, one or the other, depending on the council agenda, to the City Council for getting the plan adopted and finalized, so that, as I said, we'll proceed with the implementation of the various phases of the bicycle transportation plan. And then Honolulu Road Diet, we've done one outreach, and we have a website on the city's website that people who have called or they have comments on it, they can find information on the road diet. Our March Road Diet, we had close to 42 people that attended. and we had mostly residents who attended. They were very concerned about the idea of the road diet and its implementation or the impacts that will have. One of the major concerns was at Trader Joe's intersection where the Trader Joe's is at Orangedale. Having heard their complaint and knowing that there could be an issue with that, we've redesigned that intersection. In other words, maintaining the flow of traffic and the number of lanes goes through that intersection. Also at Rosemont, there's a Montessori element, it's a daycare center. There's an issue with that at that intersection at Rosemont, so we've been able to redesign that. On the Thursday night, we have a second outreach meeting that will be at the Spar Heights at 7 p.m. for those of you or anybody who's interested to attend that meeting. We will, again, we do a presentation. We show an aerial photo of how the existing lane configuration is, how it will be changed, and answer questions to residents and try to give them as much information, and if there are issues that they raise, we will try to address that.
And that presentation is available online as well?
The presentation is not, but we have a cross-section of before and after. We photoshopped the cross-section of Honolulu. It's on the city's website, and it does give you all the reasons and what we're trying to achieve as part of the road diet on Honolulu. That's all on the city's website.
Any visuals you have, I would put them on the website if they're not already.
Yes, we will. What we are presenting is very large, the whole strip map of Honolulu, so it's very long and it's very difficult to put it on the website. But information is there. I certainly encourage anybody who's interested, businesses or residents, to come to the meeting and provide us with input, and sometimes they raise good comments, which we can look at it and try to address them before implementation. So far, the way it looks, we've done the design almost complete. We've addressed some of the intersectional issues. If everything goes well, sometime in June, we will be implementing the road diet as is planned. And we'll do before and after analysis on the road diet as well.
Thank you. Any commissioner comments?
I do, but mine's kind of heavy.
Well, I do have one question.
Okay, so is mine.
I do have one question as far as what's being done, public outreach to bicyclists to obey the traffic laws. And for the few that are not, they're not painting a good image of bicyclists. And because of that, there's a movement now against these road diets and what have you. I do observe it all the time on Mountain Avenue. Any Sunday morning you go out there, there's a groups of bicyclists, 15, 20 at a time, zooming through stop signs. And I almost witnessed a stroller being hit by a group of bicyclists, not one bicyclist. So there's absolute disregard of obeying the law. And again, it's not the majority. It's probably a small group of people that they think they're on the Tour de France every weekend, but they're not painting a good image for the rest of them who commute to work and who obey the laws. And something needs to be done about that before this anti-bicycle movement, because there is a movement against anti-bicyclists. I mean, the Honolulu road diet, 90 to 95% were against it, from what I understand, out of the 40, 50 people that showed up. So that's something that I'd like to see some type of an effort instead of just sending out, cops and enforcing the law. Some type of an effort to tell bicyclists that you need to stop at the stop signs and you need to stop at the signals and what have you.
If I may, kind of jump in here. I have a fairly long list of comments, and that was sort of at the top of my list. I did attend the last meeting, the outreach meeting for the Honolulu Road Diet, and I wouldn't put the percentages as quite as high as 90. I would say maybe it was about 75-25. And a lot of the people there who were against it, I mean, perhaps came around a little bit after they heard some of the other measures that were going to be taken and some of the the engineering changes that address the comments they had. But I think your point is very well taken, and it was something that was, Jono mentioned that the Planning Commission at their meeting last week unanimously passed the bicycle transportation plan and the associated environmental document, which is a negative declaration. Commissioner Sheets specifically mentioned that enforcement and education are perhaps the two of the most important components, and this was something that I happen to agree with him, and so I wanted to mention a couple things, which was I spoke to Lieutenant Bickle, who is the officer, the Glendale police officer in charge of the North Area Command, and I would like to have the same conversation with all the other GPD area commanders as well. I specifically made a request, not only to Lieutenant Bickle, but also to Matt Zakarian, who is our community policing officer in that area. We want to emphasize that Glendale PD needs to enforce the bicycle laws. We've heard from several police officers that this isn't necessarily an area where they put a lot of emphasis, and we would like to change that. So we specifically requested of Lieutenant Bickle and Officer Zakarian, please enforce those bicycle laws. If you see bicyclists running stop signs, cite them, ticket them. It needs to happen because, as Commissioner Sahakian said, unless that is happening and unless our other citizens see that happening, that will go a long way toward helping out with the problem of this minority of the bicycle riders that flout the law. And it absolutely needs to be enforced. They should not be getting a free ride, so to speak. And the second part of that is under the area of education. Glendale PD on May 19th is going to be doing a bicycle safety and skills rodeo at R.D. White Elementary School, where the police officers actually go into the school and they will teach hands-on, proper and safe and legal bicycle riding techniques. And I don't know what the budgetary constraints are on that, but I would strongly advocate that that program should be done to all elementary schools in Glendale. Bring our police officers in there and let's instruct these kids, get them at a young age when they're still impressionable and willing to listen, and teach them safe and legal bicycle riding techniques. And I have a bunch more comments that relate to other things, but I don't know, should I just keep going?
On what you were saying, I've got something else to talk about, but just to touch on that issue. In addition to the police jumping in and you know, I mentioned this. It seems like things I've been mentioning are kind of falling on deaf ears, but I did mention a while ago, maybe about a year ago, that in discussion with police officers, that was their main concern, is that especially going up Brand Boulevard, they travel in the packs, and from what they were telling me, it's difficult to enforce it when they are traveling. If it's one bicyclist, it's a little bit more manageable. When you're in a pack, it's a little bit more difficult to get a grip on that situation. But just one little addition to it. And I mentioned this, at the meetings for the subcommittee meetings for the master or the draft plan for the bicycle plan. The LA Bicycle Coalition has done a fine job in promoting and moving forward of a vision for Glendale that includes bicyclists. I would like to see, and I have mentioned it before, that there's what you said, and it's been mentioned here, self-policing and self-education, and they themselves are showing the rest of the community that they want to be part of this community. They're willing to play by the rules that everyone has to abide by. So I would like to see also that great group of people, I have a great respect for them, to start doing that education amongst themselves and getting the word out.
Well, why don't you continue on?
All right, let me jump in. Yeah, I have my other comments are this. I would like to sound the alarm. I would love for the powers that be in Glendale to take note and issue of what is being proposed to be built in the city of La Cañada Flintridge. Up at Sacred Heart Academy, a proposal to build a what many term to be a monstrosity, a huge performing arts center, which is located, if you're not familiar with that area, just residents. It's just houses. And they're windy streets, and there have been no improvements to those streets since 1994. Now, how does Glendale play into all this? In order to get up to Sacred Heart, coming from the Glendale area, you're going to be driving up Chevy Chase. You're going to be using Chevy Chase, Figueroa, San Augustine. Those are the main streets that are going to be used, most probably to be carrying the tons of trucks that will be coming every 5 minutes. They're going to be tearing up our streets. That school doesn't pay a property tax, from what I understand. They are exempt. We're going to be flipping the bill. And I want to know what Glendale is doing from higher ups, the city. What is our position in all this? I would love to see the Chevy Chase Homeowners Association start asking questions of the city of La Cañada Flint Ridge to find out more in more detail how they will be impacted. Right now, there's over 400 students enrolled. If this is a performing arts center drawing people from all over, there is going to be a ton of vehicles going up those streets. And it's not going to be a nice residential quiet area. It's going to be a thoroughfare. And people need to get the information now. And I'd like to find out where Glendale is. What is Glendale doing? What kind of questions are being asked? Has the EIR been completed? What is the impact that's going to be felt? But I'll tell you now, having lived up in that area, in my younger years, it's very, very difficult, those streets. And the kids, as right now, they fly up those streets. Now, just imagine those kids with people coming to use the Performing Arts Center. They're not going to care that there are people living in houses along the way. Our streets are going to be ripped up. And I don't want to see us flipping the bill for any of this. Not only the bill for the initial construction of this, what they could term monstrosity, but the impact of years to come once built. The flow of traffic, the increase of volume going up Chevy Chase Canyon. And I know that homeowners association, they're very concerned about preserving their fine quality of life there. I hope all of them are taking heed and are watching this very carefully, because this will significantly impact their lives, I believe, in my opinion, if this gets pushed through and is constructed. So I'd like to know, John, I don't know if you have any comments on this issue.
My understanding, I know this has come up, and this was going forward, but it's been pulled back by the City of La Cañada to do a full environmental review on it. And I have not heard about if the document has been completed, but I can certainly follow up on it and find out what their traffic impacts are as part of the environmental review that they will be conducting, and we will certainly, as an agency, neighboring agency, we can comment on it. What influence we have in terms of restricting it, that's part of the environmental review that we will comment on their document, on the project itself, and certainly evaluate the impacts that they determined, if has any impacts. That's, depending on 400 seat performing arts, how many trips it will generate during peak hour, non-peak hour, and whether or not that is considered significant. We'll certainly follow up and report back to the Commission.
Wonderful, thank you.
Is that the only way to get there?
From the Glendale,
From the Glendale
it's the main artery. Up into that area is Chevy Chase.
But there is a back way?
Not really. If you're coming from Glendale,
From Pasadena.
From Pasadena, you can come the
there's
back
back ways from Pasadena, but if you're in Glendale, really the
Have to
only
take
way
Chevy Chase
is
up.
to take Chevy Chase up.
Yeah, or you could come up Linda Vista, or you could come up Chevy Chase from the La Cañada side if you were coming from.
But either way, you'll find yourself
But
on
those
Glendale
are still
streets.
twisty, narrow
Right.
roads. All.
You'll still be impacting some Glendale
It's not
streets.
near the freeway, the 210?
That's the school. No, this school is a unique aberration of planning. It's amongst just residents, and it will severely impact, I believe, the quality of life. So I look forward to seeing what you bring back, Jono, because, and I also encourage anyone who lives in those areas to please inquire, submit, information requests from the City of La Cañada Flint Ridge, and let them know that, the City of Glendale isn't going to sit idly by, or the residents, when they build such a huge, from what I was told, 150,000 square foot
buildings. So this is not a little project.
Thank you. Mr. Westman?
Okay. Yes. Just wanted to report briefly on the activities of the Metro Citizens Advisory Committee on which I sit. The last meeting, we had a discussion on Measure R contingency funding, which I'm not going to go into here, because the other thing we discussed was actually, I found a bit more interesting, which has to do with restoration of historic streetcar service in downtown Los Angeles. Now, my friends who are rail enthusiasts insist that this is not going to happen in our lifetime, but the plan is actually very interesting. It's historically in downtown Los Angeles, there did used to be a streetcar that ran down Broadway, and they are talking about revamping it basically and reintroducing a streetcar in that area that actually will run very close to the original alignment of the old streetcar tracks. The local preferred alternative route will go down Broadway from the City Hall area all the way to 11th Street, and then up Figueroa to 7th Street, where the Metro Blue Line station access is. And there may also be a spur that goes up First Street to the Music Center and to Disney Hall. And it's still pretty much in the planning stages right now, and don't know when it will happen, but I thought that was an interesting thing that is being proposed. Also wanted to note that the Metro Expo line grand opening is going to be this Friday, and I'm not sure when it's going to actually open for service to the public, but that's going to be another event I'm going to be attending. Also, Metro headquarters is hosting the Pedestrians Count 2012 conference on May 3rd and 4th, which I've registered for and will be attending. And the last thing I wanted to mention is I wanted to thank Commissioner Sahakian for letting us know about the Michigan Department of Transportation road diet study. I haven't had the chance yet to read it in its entirety. I've looked at some of the summaries and the abstracts, and I think it's a very comprehensive report, and it's good information that we should keep in mind when we are considering road diets. I noticed on the website of the Michigan Coalition for Complete Streets, I wasn't aware of this, but Michigan probably has more experience with road diets than most other states in the United States. The Michigan Department of Transportation, and this information is as of last year, they had completed at least 45 miles of road diets on state trunk lines, and some local jurisdictions, cities and counties, have done many more miles of road diets, and I think it's good to keep in mind the fact that we need to pay very close attention to the ADTs on the streets that are being proposed for road diets. And I wanted to ask you a question, Jono. I know that the ADTs for the Honolulu proposed road diet are within the parameters of what is acceptable. This particular study mentions peak hour ADTs, and I was going to ask if we have done any peak hour ADT studies on Honolulu.
Peak hour is the 1 hour, which is the 1,000 is in this study. When we do our traffic counts for Honolulu, we'll have the peak hour counts. We'll also have an ADT, average daily traffic, that's the 24-hour count. So we'll do before and after for both AM, PM.
Okay.
And then we'll do that. We'll certainly do one on weekends too, because the weekends is where you have more bicyclists versus weekdays. So we'll have all that information.
And the reason I bring it up is because the trade-offs here are fairly complex. Yes, it is going to slow traffic down. On the other hand, that may be a desirable goal, especially in terms of a street where we have many convalescent hospitals with senior citizens who would be much safer crossing 2 lanes of traffic instead of 4, and where we have several elementary schools and other schools where there are safety issues regarding students. Having listened to the public outreach meeting, and I'll be attending the next one Thursday at Spar Heights, there is, and it's understandable that people are are a little bit apprehensive about possible problems that may happen. And I am cautiously optimistic that the road diet will prove to be successful. I'm glad to hear about the re-engineering of the Orangedale intersection. Right now, it is not really very safe because you've got 2 lanes that go down to 1, basically within the width of that single intersection. And I'm sure the management of Trader Joe's is very interested in making sure not only that this is safe for everybody, but that it will also be able to support, flow of traffic in an efficient manner. So again, I wanted to thank my colleague for sending that out. That's all I have.
Any other comments?
I do. I was going to bring that up, and I want to thank also John, because I think you guys already started studying it, and they were the ones to tell me it's not an ITE study, it was a Michigan DOT study. And also another observation that John made was that the study was done by scholars and not engineers. It makes a big difference because engineers sometimes...
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's a good thing in a sense that it's an unbiased opinion. That's in that sense, it's a plus. So that's that. One other issue that I want to discuss is Mountain Avenue and the 2 freeway northbound on-ramp, off-ramp. What's been happening there, Jano, is eastbound traffic. There's a dual left turn there onto the freeway on-ramp, onto the 2 northbound freeway on-ramp. But people are not waiting for that left arrow, so they go straight through the intersection and make a U-turn just short of the raised median island, and then they get on the freeway. Now, I've been observing it with no problem, and I wasn't going to bring it up until last Thursday in the morning, where a car coming down westbound on Mountain, and there is a slight visibility problem because there's a curvature there, and he was coming down fast, and there was almost a T-bone accident that I witnessed. So now that it's a safety issue and I was a witness, I have to put it on the table. So a no U-turn sign may be warranted if you guys can take a look at
Certainly,
that.
I'm familiar with your...
Are you?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm seeing it more and more. Every morning there's at least 3-4 cars, and this is during one signal cycle that you see that they do that. Now, it could be that, and I spoke with my colleague here, that the left turn signal timing is too short. Is that Caltrans control?
This is Caltrans. I think what happens is people who are rushing to get onto the freeway, if they miss the left turn, the green light comes, they go through, make a U-turn, get back onto the 2 north. So,
but also the pocket looks like it's a 60-foot pocket. It's a short pocket, but the geometry doesn't allow you to have a longer pocket there.
Yeah, it's back-to-back left turns.
Right, but just the fact that you do have a visibility issue there, a sight distance, maybe the no U-turn sign could be warranted.
We'll certainly look into it.
Okay.
Thank you for that comment.
And that's it.
Please.
Yeah, I have 2 quick comments, Mr. Chairman. And then, first, I'd like to thank Jono. Jono, thank you for walking us through this process. You went through the taxi cab issues, even though it was a little bit outside of the discussions here. And really, I like to congratulate you on this wonderful job that you have done on this one. Second comment I have it is on ticketing bicyclists. One of the reasons that motorists get ticket is to discourage them for repeating the offense. I'm not sure how you can ticket bicyclists who pass the stop sign. Then if they repeat it, you ticket them again, or not us, but Glendale Police Department. And then if they're in the 3rd violation, what are you going to do? Take their license away?
Take their bicycle.
Take the bike.
Away? So this is a caution to my fellow commissioners here that, we should not get over our head on this. There are issues beyond this. Bicycle issue, I come from a city that we're dealing with this. I mean, I'm spending 75% of my time right now on bicycle issues. It is very delicate and it's very important. And we should be very careful what the decisions we're making here about bicycling in Southern California. Mr. Mr. Sarkin, I've seen a lot of bicycles. I live very close to where you live, and then I've seen a lot of violations. But I am not sure if Glendale PD can really effectively stop this violation.
Mr. Chairman, since that topic has been shared by all the commissioners, a couple of things we've done. We have a traffic safety committee with the police department that we're looking at that subject. We're meeting monthly. That subject has come up, and police is going to allocate resources to deal with it. Again, it's a city, large city, so it's very difficult, but areas that we know that the problem is, the police will form a task force like they've done on pedestrian safety, people who are now stopping for pedestrians. The same thing could go with bicycles. So there is going to be attention paid by the police since we have more bicyclists compared to years ago. That's one. We have sponsored with the LA Bike Coalition a certification program that a number of Bike Walk Glendale members participate in learning how to become a trainer so that they can train others, whether it's the kids or adults, how to ride their bike, how to safely ride their bike. So we've sponsored that program. It was done here in the police community last month. We've also, under the Safe Route to School program, allocated funding. We have received grant money so that we can actually go to every school, majority of the schools, one by one, do training for the kids at different age groups so that how to ride their bikes. So as they grow and they ride their bikes with their parents, at least they make sure that they know what the rules of the roads are, and try to educate them as quick as we can at the younger education. So I will take that message for certain to the police department that we all share that same concern.
I wonder if there's because I was going to mention Commissioner Saga and I, we rode the Expo line the past week, and it's great. It's very cool. One thing the MTA does is they put these ambassadors out at all the intersections to tell people, you're going to hit the train if you do this and that. I wonder if there's some civilian group of people, maybe high school students, maybe somebody who can. Maybe on Sunday mornings when the packs are coming through, I wonder if that can be some sort of ambassadorial. It wouldn't have a law enforcement function, but folks are doing a little sort of outreach. And the other thing that comes to mind is maybe you don't want to oversign the city. Maybe in a couple of key places you put a sign, bikes must obey traffic laws, or just some.
And certainly work with the volunteer groups, the Bike Walk Glendale. We can work with the Coalition, LA Coalition, and see if there's anything we can do. Again, it's at the end of the day, it's for their own safety as well as the safety of others. So we are working in those areas, but I would certainly follow through with the enforcement and the education component.
Mr. Sakin said it best. It's the few bad apples. It's creating a bad impression.
Definitely,
you don't
it
want
is.
a backlash.
And a big part of the issue for me is there is a perception among motorists in Glendale that bicyclists never, ever get ticketed or cited. And even if just a few of them get cited, in an area where the people driving by notice it happening, I would hope would help to change that perception.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Anything else? Or a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you.